Hi everybody, welcome to day 2 of story time. So make sure you're all comfy, you've got everything you need, and let's carry on with our story. So as I said the other day, we are reading the book A Diary of Dreams. It's the first book in the Universal series, and Hugh has just had this bright idea about creating this vision wall and dreaming again after he's had some troubles. Chapter 2. Passports at the ready. Jane was sitting on Ali's bed as she watched Ali pulling clothes out her wardrobe. Jane had called round after receiving a frantic call from Ali the night before, with her repeating over and over, "I can't believe it. I've gone and done it. What was I thinking? Why did I think we could do this?" As Jane tried to get a word in when Ali took a breath, which wasn't very often, she found out that Hugh had suggested that they should go on a trip to America, and in the middle of the night Ali had brought 2 plane tickets. Ever since then, she had been finding excuses why not to go, and how they couldn't just up and leave, yet she still couldn't bring herself to cancel their reservation. Every time she got close, the picture Hugh's look of utter disappointment when she told him what she had done, and she decided she just couldn't let him down or be the one to take the dream away. They were flying tomorrow. Hugh had already laid his clothes out on the floor, ready to put in his suitcase, and packed his travel bag for the plane. Ali, on the other hand, was frantically running around the house trying to gather her things. As Ali tried on another pair of jeans, she let out a sigh as they fell from her hips to the floor. She hadn't realised how much weight she had lost over the last 6 months. "America's supposed to be great for shopping," Jane mentioned, trying to calm Ali down. "I think it may come to that if I can't find anything to wear," as Ali grabbed a jumper and threw it in the suitcase. "I don't even know what to pack," she exclaimed, chucking a summer dress into the case too. "I don't know where we are going or what we are going to be doing. I must be crazy," Ali said frantically. Hugh walked in and placed some clean clothes from downstairs on the dresser and sat next to Jane on the bed. "Don't worry, Mum. We can figure all that out when we get there. We have the plane tickets and have booked a hire car. We will always be able to find somewhere to sleep and eat. Worst case scenario is that it doesn't work out and we change our minds and return back home sooner." "How can he be so calm about all this?" Ali thought to herself. "My 8-year-old son is so calm and collected, just embracing the fact that we are going on a spontaneous adventure, and I am freaking out. There is something not quite right about that. I should be the adult." Ali stopped what she was doing as she realised that she had been acting like a child for the last 6 months. She looked up at where Jane and Hugh were sat. Maybe this trip is really what they needed. "Right, what else do I need?" Ali said aloud. "Have you got your toothbrush, Mum?" "No, I haven't," and Ali disappeared to get her toiletries bag. While Ali was gone, Jane took out an envelope and 2 diaries. "This is for you and your mum, but don't show it to her until your first night in America." Hugh opened up the envelope and saw a handful of American dollars. He closed the envelope and gave Jane a big hug. "Thank you," he said. "Make sure your mum spends it on something wonderful." Jane replied. "I promise," Hugh said, sliding off the bed. "While you are there, you and your mum can both make a diary of your adventure," Jane instructed. Hugh looked at the diaries in his hand and looked back at Jane before making his way into his room, avoiding seeing his mum. Ali re-entered with her toiletries bag. "Well," Jane said while standing up, "I will see you at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning." Ali wasn't listening. She was fixated with the weighing scales, trying to work out if her bag was too heavy. Jane walked across the room and gave her a big hug. "Everything is going to be all right." And with that, she left. Ali put her suitcase at the bottom of her bed and made her way into Hugh's room, where Hugh had begun to pack his own suitcase. "Do you need any help with that, monkey?" "No, I can do it, Mum." Ali leant against the doorframe and watched as her son systematically packed his suitcase, putting all the trousers together, then the tops, finishing with pants and socks. Well, I'll go and put the dinner on, Ali said. Okay, Mum, Hugh replied warmly. Ever since he had found out that his mum had bought the tickets, he was doing everything he could to keep the peace, so his mum didn't have any reason to cancel the trip. When he had finished packing and closed the suitcase lid, he placed it in front of his wardrobe, where he stood and looked up at his vision wall. He looked at the pictures that were around the American flag, the places he was going to see, the people he was going to meet, and then he saw his dream that he was going to achieve. He smiled to himself as every cell in his body knew that it would all come true, but he couldn't help wonder about his mum, what the trip would bring for her, who she would meet, whether she would find her happiness. Then he heard Ali's voice. Dinner's ready! At this, Hugh broke away from the vision wall and headed down the stairs. That night he slept like a log. Ali, on the other hand, was running through every possible scenario that could happen whilst they were out in America, and most of them weren't positive ones. They were all, what if this happens, and what if that happens, what if. She slid down her bed and pulled the duvet up so only her eyes were visible, as her mind kept firing new thoughts at her, one after another. She closed her eyes, hoping this would slow her mind, and then before she knew it, she was asleep. Ali felt a little hand on her shoulder. Mum, it's time to get up. It's 4 a.m. She rolled over. It's too early. She had only managed to get an hour's sleep. Mum, we're going to America today. Ali's eyes shot open as her stomach began its own acrobatic routine. She heard Hugh's footsteps as he made his way downstairs. Then she heard the tap turn on as he filled the kettle. Ali was still staring out of the window in disbelief that this was really happening. Hugh returned shortly with a steaming hot cup of tea. There you go, Mum, he said, putting it down on her dresser. I'm going to go and have a shower, Hugh said, as Ali just nodded as no words would come out of her mouth. As she heard Hugh singing in the shower, Ali sat up in bed, lifted the cup of tea to her mouth and took a long sip. Whoever invented tea was a genius, as it fits all occasions, celebrations, commiserations, girly nights, tearful nights. A cup of tea is all you need. As her stomach finished its routine, Ali placed her feet on the carpet by the side of the bed. It's a new day, Ali, full of new beginnings and opportunities, she said to herself, trying to find comfort in what lay ahead of her that day. I'm done, Mum, Hugh shouted across the landing. Okay, Ali replied and made her way to the bathroom. As Ali was finishing getting ready, she heard the front door open and Jane shout, Hello, anyone home? We're up just upstairs, Hugh shouted back in response. Then Ali saw Hugh wheel his suitcase down the stairs, thump, 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 as he made his way down. Ali got her coat, had one last look in the mirror and quickly dismissed her reflections. It's too early to be worrying about that. I look like she took hold of the handle of the suitcase and made her way down the stairs. As she reached the kitchen, Jane stood there with a cup of tea in her hand. Morning, sunshine, Jane said. Ali lifted her eyebrows. Morning is 3 hours away. Jane smirked. Jane, is your car open? Hugh asked from the living room. Yes, she called. Then the front door was open and Hugh was pulling his suitcase towards the boot of the car. Ali followed in pursuit to help him lift it in. When they both got back in the house, Jane was just putting her cup in the sink and taking her car keys off the worktop. Right then, time to hit the road, and made her way out the front door with Hugh hot on her heels. Ali took one look around the house before closing the door. As she put the key in the lock, not knowing what lay ahead, she knew one thing, that this trip was one giant leap of faith. Ali opened the passenger car door and got in. As Jane pulled off, Hugh started to clap his hand. One team, one dream, he cheered. Jane looked in the rearview mirror and smiled back at Hugh. One team, one dream, she replied. Ali wasn't quite ready to get excited about the trip just yet. It had taken her all of her strength to walk out the front door and get in the car. They reached the drop-off zone at the airport. Ali hadn't said a word on the drive there, and Hugh was busy telling Jane about his latest creation on the vision wall. As Jane turned off the ignition and made her way to the boot, Hugh jumped out and joined her, taking his suitcase out and placing it on the floor. Ali was frozen in her seat as she could hear the car door open. "There is no point delaying the inevitable," said Jane. As Ali looked up at her, Ali took a deep breath in, undid her seatbelt, and got out. Jane immediately gave her a big hug. "Everything is going to be okay, and if you have any trouble, get on the next plane back, and I'll be here, ready to pick you up." Ali couldn't stop a tear leaking out. "Thank you for everything," she said. "Oh, stop it. It's not goodbye. It's just see you later," Jane replied cheerfully. Ali wiped away her tear and made her way to where her suitcase and son were waiting. They made their way to the departures area and walked through the door. They were then embraced into a throng of people going this way and that, parents trying to keep their families all together as they were looking at the screens, finding out which check-in desks they needed to go to. The airport workers were walking by, talking about the latest gossip in the airport, and the cleaner whistled in the background as he emptied the bins. Ali felt a warm hand take hold of her own and gave it a squeeze. "Right, yes," Ali said, snapping out of her daze. "Desk 11, that's where we need to head to." As Ali and Hugh waited in the queue for check-in, Hugh turned to the people behind him who were a retired couple stood waiting. "Hi, I'm Hugh," he said. The woman looked at Hugh. "Hi, I'm Helen, and this is Bill," she replied, pointing to the man standing next to her. "We're off to America on an adventure," Hugh explained. "Wow, that's very exciting. What kind of an adventure?" Helen asked. "A magical one," Hugh said, excited. "Where are you going?" he asked. "We're heading back home," Helen responded. "We have been in the UK to visit friends," she explained. Ali was oblivious to what was happening, as she was too busy watching the people check in one by one. Hugh smiled at Helen. "It's really nice to meet you," and turned back to Ali. He knew this was going to be a great trip. Helen smiled and turned back to her husband Bill. Hugh had an uncanny ability to make friends really easily, no matter where he was or who he was speaking to. As they reached the desk, the check-in lady looked up from her computer screen. "Good morning," the lady said with a glow of happiness in her eyes. Ali began to relax as she placed the suitcases on the conveyor belt and got the passports out of her handbag. "Did you pack your own bags?" the check-in lady asked. "Yes, we did," Ali replied, leaning on the desk. Hugh was holding on to Ali's coat, examining all that was happening in the airport. The check-in lady handed Ali the boarding passes. "Have a great flight," she concluded. Ali took Hugh's hand and they made their way to the security. "Right, monkey, we will get to the departure lounge and have some breakfast." "Right you are, Mum," Hugh said, skipping by her side. As they sat in the departure lounge, tucking into a full English breakfast, Ali was nursing her tea. First bit over and done with, she thought. She was breaking the day down into little steps and mentally ticking them off one by one as they made their way through the day. Hugh hadn't said much since they had entered security, as he saw his mum deep in thought and considered it best to leave her be. He watched as the different planes took off to their different destinations. Not long now, he thought, before him and his mum would be on the plane taking off. His mum could most definitely not back out then. All that's left to do is to get her on the plane, he thought as he watched another plane take off. Ali glanced down at her watch. 10 minutes until the gates open. She took one more swig of tea. "Shall we make our way down to the departure gate?" she asked. Hugh took his coat from the back of the chair, threaded his arms through and hopped off the chair. "Let's go, Mum," he replied. Ali stood up, hooked her hand through her handbag handle, and they made their way to the departure gate. When they reached gate 17, Hugh spotted the people he was speaking to at check-in and pulled his mum over to where they were sitting. "Hello again," Helen called out. Hi, Hugh replied. This is my mum, he said, pulling his mum closer to him. Hi, Ali said, holding out her hand. Helen took it and they shook hands. Hi, she replied. Her husband Bill looked up from his newspaper and gave her a nod. Helen nudged him. Don't be so rude, she said in jest. She turned back to Ali and Hugh. Ignore Grumpy over there, she said, nodding her head towards her husband. Hugh told me you were off on an adventure, Helen asked Alice. Ali smiled wearily. It seems, she replied. Helen saw Ali didn't quite have the same enthusiasm as Hugh. Well, good on you, it sounds incredible, she said, trying to lighten the mood. What made you decide to go on the trip? Helen asked. Hugh looked at Ali, waiting for her response. Ali wondered how many times she was going to have to tell the story as she began to explain the last 6 months of Hugh's dad dying and Hugh's vision wall. As Ali reached the present day, Helen was smiling with love. Ah, it sounds like the big man upstairs thinks it's time for some healing. Alice looked at her confused. Big man upstairs? Yes, Helen responded enthusiastically. God, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it. Her husband Bill stepped in. Oh, don't start with that rubbish. You'll scare the woman half to death, pointing his finger at Ali. Helen sat back in her seat and didn't say another word, but looked over to Hugh and winked. Hugh smiled back. Then there was an announcement. Gate 17 is now open for boarding. All 4 of them stood up, picked up their bags and joined the queue. They reached the stand where Ali handed the tickets over. Have a great flight, the man said as he handed the tickets back to Ali. Through into the tunnel they went. As their footsteps echoed, Ali's heart began to beat rapidly. I can't do this. I can't do this, she kept repeating to herself. She could hear Hugh talking to her about something, but all she could hear was the rapid heartbeat ringing in her ears. As they reached the plane door, they were greeted by a very smiley air hostess. Good morning, she said merrily, looking at the tickets Ali had just handed her. You're just down the aisle on the right. Hugh went ahead and made his way to where the air hostess was pointing. Ali smiled and followed him. As Hugh reached the seats with the signs 32A, 32B and 32C, he slid in first to make sure he got the window seat. Ali lifted her bag up into the overhead locker and sat in the middle seat, watching the plane slowly fill up as the people found their seats. Please no one sit next to me, Ali said. Hugh looked across at his mum with her eyes scrunched closed and fingers crossed, and went back to looking out the window. As the last few people boarded the plane and found their seats, Ali looked at the empty seat next to her and let out a sigh of relief. Hugh turned to his mum. Now you're beginning to remember how it works. Ali looked at him, dismissing the comment, and began to watch the safety demonstration. The plane jolted into motion as it reversed out and made its way onto the runway. The air hostess walked down the aeroplane aisle, checking seatbelts and that all the lockers were closed before finding her seat. As the plane came to a halt with the long runway ahead of it, Hugh was now intently watching everything that was happening out the window. Ali took hold of the seat armrest, one in each hand, in a firm grip when the pilot began to rev the engine. In no time at all, the plane was moving forward, up into the air, climbing rapidly. Ali closed her eyes. She hated this bit. The plane began to level out. Ali stopped holding her breath and joined Hugh looking out the window, watching the clouds pass by. No going back now, she said. Hugh turned and gave her a kiss. One team, one dream, he said before turning back to continue looking out the window. That's chapter 2. It's getting very exciting. So I will see you for the next chapter, which is Map of Dreams. Have a wonderful day.